Hi everybody, I'm Esin and I have a presentation for you today. Its name is Writing Course Materials for the World, A Great Compromise by Jim Bell and Roger Gover. So let's have a look at my outline. Let me just do it. We are going to continue with where Elif left off. Firstly, on my outline, the first item is principles, the second one is pressures, the third one is principles, compromise, and the lastly, we are going to have question answer phrase, but we are not going to be doing this in the video. We are going to do questions and answers in the classroom. So let's move on. Firstly, the principles. The writers of the book mainly used 11 principles, yes. The first one is the flexibility. They wanted the activity sequence to be flexible and they wanted to allow teacher to change the order of the activity or move them around or cut the activities out when they felt it is necessary. They also trusted the teacher's autonomy, so they created a flexible activity sequence, and they left the choice to do the activities to the teacher's autonomy. Now, the second principle is from text to language. They mostly use the focus language, the target language, and they use authentic text, such as memos, reports, or emails, contractors, and these are the written texts that the written authentic texts that we can and we need to use in our classroom. They make use of these texts in their source. The third one is engaging content. They created this book as a resource for language and as the basis for speaking and writing. So we in contrary to other books that we can see or we have used so far, they mostly use this productive skills as a basis for their book, and this is good. They also try to keep the balance between fun and serious articles. Although what someone can understand from fun and serious may differ from person to person. They basically stayed away from controversial topics. They mostly focused on engaging content. The fourth one is language, natural language. They wanted the students to be exposed to the real and unscripted language as much as possible. It is important for students to learn the real language that they're going to be using in their life, rather than learning some structures, some directly grammar topics. It's not beneficial for the students. Okay, let's move on. The fifth one, the analytic approaches. They used a variety of approaches to grammar, such as deductive, inductive approach, or analytic approach. They just wanted to they used all of the approaches so that they catered all the learning styles for the students out there. For their learning style might differ from one another, so the writers wanted to propose the solution by suggesting by using a variety of approaches to grammar. The sixth one is emphasis on review. The writers reviewed the topic rather than present a lot of grammar at a time at an intermediate level. They wanted fluent and accurate use rather than they tried to get across the meaning or the structure. So as I said before, they didn't just give the structure directly. They mostly focused on fluent and accurate use of that structure. They didn't try to get across the meaning. The students do not need to hear it in the mother tongue. They need to just comprehend what the structure is trying to tell us. So fluent and accurate use is good for us. The seventh one is personalized practice. As we have already seen or heard, internalization is very important. It's the writer thought that every activity, including oral practice of pronunciation or fixed structures, that should, as far as possible, be personalized. Personalization and internalizing is very important so that the students can relate what the topic is about to their own life. They can create a connection and make the learning as be as possible as more possible as effective. Okay, now let's move on. The eighth one is integrated skills. These writers use both receptive skills and productive skills. This is really important. We all have been raised with the receptive skills. We all have already learned. We all have already learned receptive skills more often than we learn productive skills or than we teach productive skills. This is important that we need. It is important that we need to expose our students to productive skills as well, because they're not going to just read or listen to like all the time, but they need to, in real life, they need to communicate, they need to produce something, write something, or say something. As we all know, communication is the key in our life, and communicating in the target language only improves is only improved by actually using it. It's like playing tennis. You need lots of experience and lots of exposure to the tennis so that you can improve yourself upon that. So we need to teach both productive and receptive skills at a time, and so that they can write something about, or they can talk about something they already have read or they have already listened to. We need to integrate those four skills in our classroom, and they already did that in their book. Besides, they also use the Krashen's I+1 approach. In this approach, the material is one step beyond the students' level. This is to improve students' language skills, and this is a good approach. Okay, now let's move on. The sixth one, the other one, the balance of approaches. As I've said before, the writers used several approaches, such as inductive, deductive, and effective approaches to grammar, so that they catered all the learning styles, all the learning techniques to students. And they also provided both controlled practice and creative expressions for both students and teachers. As I said before, it is important to use several approaches, so because students' learning styles might differ from one another, so we need to present everything we have, and they need to grasp what they want to as how they want. The other one is learning to learn, upfront work and vocabulary skill. The writers presented an upfront work on vocabulary skill in the beginning of the book, and they created a language reference for both students and teachers at the end of each unit, so that the students can remember the language references before they finish the units. And the other one is personalized vocabulary and grammar books. As we have just told, internalization is very important, and the writers made that happen by giving a chance to students to create a personalized and vocabulary and grammar books with the help of their book, their main book. Okay, the other one is professional respect. The writers wanted this book they have written to be professionally satisfactory and to be academically credible to their colleague. So they tried to do their best to make that happen. Okay, now let's move on. Pressures. Uh, Writers actually had to go through some pressures by several people. So the first one is publishers. The publishers interfered with what the writers actually are supposed to take care of. They interfered way too much with the writers' uh, profession, actually, such as they thought the use of color photographs or the flick test is not, important, but the writers said didn't think so. So they have had a kind of tiny discussion, and the other one is the publishers wanted the instruction, the rubrics to be intelligible for students. This is not true. There's going to be teachers to mediate the classroom to make use of the book. So the publishers should have stayed away from some topics, should mind their own businesses. Okay, the second one is the schools and institutions. Schools actually did interfere with the writers and what they needed to take care of way too much. They thought they always kept saying how many units there should be in a book, or how many pages in a unit, or what's the syllabus, what's the task, is there going to be tests, is there going to be quizzes. They kept interfering with the content, with the ingredients parts, whereas the writers were supposed to do that. The third one is the teachers. They thought that this book should be written with the help of pedagogic principles. Okay, this is correct. The writers already did write this book as by taking pedagogical principles into consideration. So we are okay. They also wanted a fresh and original feel to it, yet they wanted the book to be reassuringly familiar. And they wanted this book to include usable and motivating materials and fun activities so that the students can be motivated to use this book in both school and outside of the school. They also wanted this book to improve their students' communicative skills, and they wanted this book to have a transparent methodology. Okay, the other one is the students. Students actually did not, put as much pressure as much as the others. They just wanted enjoyable and comprehensible language, but they also wanted this language of the book to be new. They also wanted a lot of revision in the book so that they can how do I put this? They can work on their own. They can study on their own. They didn't need to have a teacher supervising on them. They just wanted a book that can help them to be a learner on their own. Okay, now let's move on. Principles, compromise. The writers, although they didn't want, they had to compromise somewhere. So the first one is the overall structure. They used the flexibility principle, as I've just said. This principle gives the teacher the freedom to organize your classroom, organize the activity sequences, but the writers found out that the flexibility principle were not understood or were not liked by some teachers or some markets. So they actually should have had compromised the flexibility principle. And as I said, the presented order. The teachers did not understand this principle, maybe, so they didn't change the old order of the activities. They just used the presented order. They didn't add anything or remove anything from the sequence. They just did what they were told. They were suggested. And the straightforward presentation of the main language items. They use a straightforward presentation of the main language items, but the teachers or the markets wanted. Sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, we were here. wanted not a straightforward presentation of main language items. They mostly wanted the rules, the structures of the main language items. Okay, now let's move on. The other one is methodology. A skills activity rather than a language presentation. Okay, the writer started the book with skills activities rather than presenting the language in a direct, in an inductive way. They just presented an activity that is composed of skill, both productive and receptive skills. Okay, the other one is target language out of authentic materials. The writers wanted to use, and they also actually used the target language out of authentic materials, such as we have just said, emails, memos, reports, and so on and on. They used this target language out of authentic materials, but their aim was to draw students' attention and improve upon. This actually failed. This was a good idea, but this wasn't as popular as they thought in the whole world. And the analytic exercises were actually the same with the aim there to use target language. It also failed. The analytic exercises were not as popular as they thought they should be. Okay, let's move on. The third one, the texts. They used as the text. They wanted the text to be as natural and authentic as possible. They did so, but they have been let down with the results. They thought maybe they should have compromised and they should have used scripted or shorter or easier authentic text so that the book would have been sold more. And they said that finding text with generative topic as well as an accessible degree of cultural reference and humor was not so easy. So they kind of compromised on this one too. They did their best to find these texts of generative topics, but it wasn't easy for them. So they just tried to do their best. The fourth one is the content. They try to stay away from the controversial topics, and they kept a balance between a fun and a serious topic. They didn't want the topic to be too much controversial or to be too boring for students to even read. They just, how do I put this? They just try to include topics that are the all-time favorites topics, but if they want this topics to be fresh, to remain fresh, they had to find include new angles or point of views on these topics. They tried to find not so much as controversial topics, but some topics that are interesting to everyone universally. And the last one is piloting. The pilot edition was actually proved to be a good training for the writers, although they didn't include every parts of the pilot edition in the final edition. They said that it was good to have a pilot edition so that you can know that where you were where you made a mistake, where you were right. You can learn all of them at the same time and try to stay away from your mistakes and try to learn from your mistakes in the final edition. So this is the end of my presentation. Lastly, I have a conclusion section. Let's quickly recap what we have talked about. We have talked about the principles, the pressures, the author phase, and the principles compromise. Compromise is a subtle art by definition, yet it can be satisfactory for both of the parties if they are keen on, if they are not keen on what they want to get. They should be flexible with what they want, and they should be okay with getting less than they imagined. So it is actually a good way of presenting something. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, you can ask them to me in the comment section below my video. Thank you so much.